All right. And I can handle this one copy paste while I'm still thinking of it. So there's the attendance again, for those that just came on board. All right, so Catalan, didn't you merge 36? The dark light switch? Okay, he's nodding his head. You're off screen, so nobody sees that. Let's move that to done. And I know the auth is still up in review. Don't worry about the unit tests on that one. I'll pull when we get that branch merged in, I'll help with that one. Okay. And then basic banner, I'd spent some time on that, so I just put out a pull request on that one. So let's go take a look at where we're at on our different PRs and see what we've got. So the auth, maybe what we'll do is I'll pull that down here, Dylan. We'll see if we can set up even the basics of testing on it.
All right.
I think you've gotten like one outstanding, maybe two outstanding comments at this point. There's something on the indenting on that line 41, I think that was.
Yeah, I did fix that up.
Yeah. Okay.
But
I don't know if that's the same one or not.
Yeah.
She didn't say which file that was in.
Well, I guess this is a good time to ask, should we be resolving the conversation once it's fixed, or should the initiator be resolving that?
Typically the initiator will.
Okay.
Yeah. So like in this case, I should have, but I haven't gone and looked to see if the file was fixed since I posted that. Same with the keys. So do a quick check. So here's how I usually do. I'll pull this up. I'll open this another tab, put it on another screen. You guys can't see the other screen, but it'll show me what's changed. So if I come down, the two I'm looking for, the get ignore and the auth middleware, and the auth middleware is the one I'm looking at. That's around line 39, and I come down, and yeah, it is indented a little oddly. So to what Katie was mentioning, it's indented one too many. That's about as small a fix as you can get, but that means this, what I said here was done. I'm not worried about the indenting because she's already commented on it. And then this should be removed. That was the back end get ignored, which it did not. Get ignore, but that's in the root of the project. Okay. Looks like the back end get ignore is completely gone. So that resolves that. It just leaves the one for Katie, and then you have to merge the base branch. And we can help with that right now. So but let's go take a quick peek at the other one. And then we'll come back and see if we can do unit test on this one. Okay. So this one's got a few more files. And this is the banner. Most of the crew 2 sessions ago, I think we worked through it. But I've also had to merge in Catalan's code into my code. Still got to hide this in the environment and they get ignore, getting rid of the .env so it doesn't bring security codes in. Not 100% sure where the index function JS came from, but I'm not going to worry about that. This is the back end stuff I'm not too stressed about at this point. These are just taking out console logs and comments and things like that. And then here's where the biggest part of these started to change. Where in the package, I added in the code coverage runner modules. So we brought in forms, we brought in the dialog, the input, the toolbar, browser animations, the 2 modals that we're using, and did all the proper declarations and imports on those. That's about as boring as it gets. On the local host, we added in API login, logout, register, and Dylan, we're going to match those up with what you changed them to because there was like an auth or something like that in there. But that isn't changed in mine, so I left it. for now. So there, it kind of depends on who merges first. Users. Yeah. Okay. I guess I shouldn't just say users. This is the interface. For those of you who have worked with a TypeScript interface or not, it's kind of like, in a roundabout way, like creating a type. So I can use that user as a, the colon typing. Question mark says username is optional. Right? And that's what we're using in the API handler service. Let's close that one out. To show, no, was it in the API then, I guess? Somewhere in one of these, we're using it to determine if the user's logged in or not. Here it is. So it's user. So if there's no username, they're not logged in. If there's username, they're logged in. That was just the mentality we use there, and that lines up with our interface. Okay. Unit tests, I'm going to skip those unit tests. They're in there, they're good. We got patterns. The API handler service, we abstracted it. That's where the biggest change came here. We made an abstraction. We had the get URL and the endpoints. I took out the constructor for the HTTP, the get test, and that kind of stuff, because we'll use those in the consuming service. Okay. So then we created a header API service, and okay, that's unit test. So let's skip that. That extends the API. Okay, so we have to fire the super off to make sure, and this is where we bring things in. And the nice part about having that abstracted is the get URL is available now to any of them that extend it. We don't have to rewrite that pattern every time we create an API service. I do have some console logs in. I'm not going to stress about those too much. That was more for my testing as I go, and I think we still have a lot to do on that, so I'm going to leave those alone. But this is a pattern I use. Whether it's a React service, an Angular service, doesn't matter to me. This is a pretty common pattern I use somewhat regularly, where I use a key to reference something in a JSON object so that I could use the get URL to assemble what the URL is. The key identifies which one of the ones out of the JSON object, which key out of that JSON object I want to use. Okay. Then I wrap my data call in a try catch. And in this case, I'm returning success or failure. Clearly, if we go through the catch block, it's a failure. It could properly come back from the HTTP post with a false state. So saying that it wasn't able to, in this case, log in. But we haven't written any if block around that yet. Sorry, the vast majority of this is just getting things in place. We'll probably have to create a card to go fine tune some of these things and make sure they work right. Until I'm tied to our external database. Some of this is really hard to test. Okay, but you see the same kind of pattern. So here's my logout. It's not a lot different structurally, right? We have a function to check if we are logged in, and we have a send registration. And again, structurally, it's pretty much the same thing. Okay, these need to be async, especially since if we're waiting for something to come back, we need that. But we might need to wait on that timing. Let's see our header component. This is where I integrated. Did I integrate? I thought I integrated. Yeah. Mat slide toggle. So I took it out of its wrapper and just shoved it in here. Merged all the code together. Okay. And it actually works. I switched it all to light text because it's on a dark header regardless if we're in light mode or dark mode. Okay. I'll spin it up here at the end so you guys can see. Put separators, vertical pads in between. And there was a little position fix I had to do. For some reason, it was 1 pixel below all the other text in the row. So, all right, we take it up a pixel, not a big deal. Then we had the header component spec file. That's unit test, no big deal. The header component TypeScript. So bringing stuff in. Logged in user dark mode. Brought in document same way you did. I added the API, the dialogue. That was stuff that I had added in. I set up this init dark mode, so I don't have to run any unit tests against the constructor. All I have to do is test the init dark. Yeah, down to there. There we go. So it gives me that ability to run unit tests against it. Trigger register, trigger login, trigger logout, handle register, handle login. You've seen most of those in previous sessions. We toggled dark mode. I brought that over from Catalan's code. Don't think I even changed that. I think I just brought it over. And I did take the private off the apply dark mode class because it became a nightmare to test. That one was private. I couldn't quite get it right to spy on it. So it was easier just to make it public. Spec file. Then the home API service. Our homepage had no API service. Now it does. It has it to get tests. Since we abstracted, we're able to bring that over. Okay, so if somebody's working on the homepage, they're not going to bother anybody working on another component. Okay, so I had to create this one from the ground up. No big deal there. Again, so you're seeing the same pattern. Now, the biggest difference here is I'm not returning the value. I'm attaching it to that observable, that behavior subject. So that we can, if it's ever called again, you just push it back onto the behavior subject and any code that's subscribed to that can see it. Okay, it's really kind of a cool way of doing things rather than returning, and it makes testing super easy. Let's see. So we have the header, gonna move things around here. So we have a body wrapper with the grade level of assistance and all that stuff still there, just added the wrapper. Then we can pad and things like that a little easier. Oh, what did I do? Sorry, I hit a button on the mouse. Didn't know my button on my mouse did anything. Now I do. Apparently it goes back a page. We added a wrapper, we added some CSS wrapper, so that would be left, right, 1M. Spec file on component. Since we're not using that one, it's abstracted, we have to use the right one. That's the only thing that changed, because API is still API, it's just pointing to a slightly different service. Yeah. So it didn't like the fact that I didn't have app dash or something like that before it. We've mocked our dialog ref. We mocked grade level selection. We mocked the home component. This is for isolating and tests. So this is our mock header API, and then now we're back down into shared a little further. This is the login modal. And we wrote that one last time. No major changes in there. Set up some CSS. There's spec for it. And I did the tester at 100%. I'll show you that too. Here's the login modal component where we have a username and a password and a login error. I think we have this one backwards. So login error shouldn't be, success should be true or false. We should set the error to true if it comes back false. So it should be not, I think it should be not success. Again, one of those minor cleanups once we're connected to a real database will help solve. Here's the register modal HTML, register modal CSS, register modal spec, register modal HTML. Not much difference there. We've done that before. Okay, we have an SVG. Yeah, cool. And then our global styles. Nothing exciting there. I had to move the themes up to the top and down below. Yep. So that's what's in there. So let me spin things up. Let's see. Let's open VS Code. Take a test. Opening in the terminal. I think I can run it without the back end running. You guys just get a feel for what's going on. We don't need to do the log in, log out, all that stuff. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not working right at the moment anyway. The back end's kind of halfway between what I originally wrote and what Dylan wrote, which causes all kinds of problems when it's halfway in between. We need to get to where. Here we go. So here's what we have. Here's our light mode, dark mode, and you can see it doesn't make much sense to change the font color because that border up top's not changing. The banner that it's on. There's our login that opens. And our register that opens. We're not getting a list of grades because the back end's not up and it's not pushing the file. We got a green check up there. Yay. Have I got? Okay, so that's that running. And this is code. I put coverage in earlier, set a code coverage and it screamed at me. So I know to put code coverage. So this generates the coverage report, which you can see it's 100%. We can go in here and open that with live server. Assuming I got the right one. There we go. We got the report 100, 100, 100 all the way across. Big green. That's what you like to see when you're writing unit tests. Okay. Questions. Went over a lot really fast. Yeah, no questions. You guys really want to see me write unit tests against that back end, don't you?
You just walked through it and you explained it so well. Not too many questions to be had right now.
Yeah, I was really hoping to not mess with the unit tests on that side because I have no clue what's going to happen when we try this. All right, so real quick, take a peek through here. We don't have any tests, anything in here. My guess is we're going to use Jest. So let's open a new terminal. And we're on back end, so npm install. It's probably where we're going to start, but let's, I'm not going to be really crazy and just try it. We'll go into their getting started. I think the save dev is automatic now, but we'll do that. No big deal. I had npm and not npm as well. So let's run it. Which will give us test. I have Jest installed globally on my machine. So we should be okay there too, although it might need an update for versioning. And nothing's going to happen yet because we haven't written any tests. My thinking is now a lot of this is old, like that config is really old. Data, not worried about that yet. In fact, we're probably going to get rid of that one. What I need is one of the files that has something in it that's easily testable. I don't want to bring Sequelize in. I couldn't see how we might test that one. Okay, now what we got, part of what we got to realize too is this is the old version. So let's do we're gonna okay, first package lock. Oh, these are the changes. So need to stash those changes. Where is stash? There it is. And then I want to switch to Was it 27? Is that right, Dylan?
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm going to switch here and let me stash, but it didn't let me bring it in. Let's fetch that origin. What do I do is, well, maybe I could just get rid of it. Because it should have been stashed. I should be able to pop it. But it's not showing me the merge conflict on package lock. I could care less about package lock. It's package that we usually care about. So let's undo the changes to package lock. And the easy way to solve that issue, since package is up to date, we can, this might take a few seconds, but let's delete node modules and then we'll reinstall, which will then rebuild the package lock. Right? At least that's the way it should work. Then we get a good clean package lock. There we go. All right. So test then would be Jest. Now, this is the new version, which has everything set up the way Dylan had it set up. So we can look at some things, like we can look at our index routes and our auth routes. And index routes is a pretty easy one. I'm thinking, but my first thought in quick glance at this is we're exporting a router, which would allow us to, we're setting things up with get, but how do we call the functionality? So I'm wondering if this could be isolated, and then we'd have to export. Wonder if we change this slightly. Ooh, why don't we do that? If we created a new file, I'll call it index. I'll show you what we're going to do here in a second. I'm going to move that off to the side. So what I want to do is I want to make these testable. I don't need to test router use, right? And auth router you're bringing in through auth routes. Well, what if I were to export these? So this function. And so here we're going to create a const root. Something like that. Tests. Something like that. Okay, and then this will need a module exports. Root and test. And then over here, we can bring those in. Just like that. So that then this gets past that function root. And this gets past the function tests. Similar to what we did with the auth routes, right? But here's the thing. This is a whole lot easier to test than having them wrapped inside there, right? So for our test suite here, we're going to create a new file. index functionality test Jest or spec. Some people use spec for the spec file. So first thing we need to do is we need to import, right? And we need to describe. And this is going to be index routes functionality. There's not a lot of setup and teardown. You have those functions. I'm going to move this over here so we can see the two next to each other. And we're going to say it expects tests take a response, read file, and return it. Yeah, I'm looking at this and wondering, we'll probably need to bring in file system, which I didn't see over here. Could it be getting file system from an upper layer?
Yeah, I
on
think
that
it gets
build?
it from index.
Okay, so it's coming from up here.
Hmm.
Okay. Maybe. Yeah. All right. So we're going to assume it's pulling it in, but for our test purposes, we need to do something with that. So if we bring that in as a part of the test, and I would say from there. So then we have access to file system. And then I think we can do a Jest mock. I don't know. We're going to work on that here in a minute. Let's see. So let's look at root. Root's an easier one to work with, right? So let's start there. And it's going to return 404 unauthorized. Start with the easy one, right? So in this case, we need to create a response. We need to actually request a response. Doesn't matter what's in it. And here's the interesting part, okay? So res.status is this, right? In standard JavaScript notation, right? But it's actually a function that takes a value. So we'll call it value status. And it has to return something that has sent. So for the next dot notation, and that's going to be another function with the quote description. And I'm going to make it a function so we can capture the values. That's there, okay. So that we have someplace to capture our data, let's say let the response status, we're going to set a -1 initially. Oops. Let's put an equal sign in there, right? And we're going to let response description when it comes in and we get a status, we're going to set the response status. You go to status. And we're going to set the response description. Go to that passed in description. That's a weird little setup, but what should now happen is we should be able to trigger root, passing it request and response. And we then should be able to expect response status to equal or 1, right? Expect. There we go. VS Code is so helpful. And we should also expect the response description equal unauthorized. I'd say we got 50-50, that might work. Let's see if Jest is going to look into the folders. I don't know. Look at that. It did something. Failed, but it did something. Res is not defined. Well, yeah, it's true. Wait, I was typing way too fast. Actually looked into the folder, found the test file, and we have a passing test. Okay. So the next one's going to be a little bit different because we have that file system thing we got to handle in there. So read the file and return the file. We don't actually want it to read a file, right? So now we got to figure out how to mock that FS, and FS is imported here locally for us. And should be able to do an fs dot read file equals just, then passing in a function that returns something. We can actually return a JSON object this way, or we can name it. And we'll say const JSON data anything. It's going to be really complex. So we're going to return JSON when read file is triggered. Problem is that's an await, right? Async await. So this has to be async for starters. And then this has to actually return a promise resolve of JSON, which will get past that wait to the data. And then we should get this res fired out. And the res does something similar to what we did up here. So we'll just copy those two. Yeah, there. And then we say tests and pass it request response. We do have to await since it has an async await inside it. And then we should be able to do our expects kind of like we did up here. And instead of 401, we're going to get a 200. And instead of unauthorized, we're going to get the actual JSON we have above this one, right? 50-50. FS is not defined. So our test suite is bringing in FS.
I guess
But
does
this-
need the import.
You think it does? Probably
Yeah.
does. Well, that fixed it fast, didn't it?
When all else fails, import everything.
But you can see how we pulled these out of the routes. Makes the routes a little bit cleaner. I mean, you can just start stacking them up like that, right? There isn't any major functionality we have to deal with in here. You know, in my mind, in fact, the other one I'm looking at is, do we really need passport? Is that brought in somewhere else?
The only reason I imported it there is just because we'll
Did the
need it
auth
if we want to
routes use
add
it?
auth to the routes. So like,
Yeah, but you're importing it here already.
yeah, but I mean for like say like the test route, if we wanted the user to be logged in for them to get the tests, we would need to import passport, but we can take it out since we're not doing that right now. But
It's, you know,
yeah,
not
it
gonna worry
doesn't-
about that right now.
Yeah, I mean either way.
But what I wanted to show you was more of how could we set up and start to isolate to do tests, right? It's working. There's a long way to go on it. Clearly, you know, when I look at the auth routes, you know, we've got this register does a lot. It's hard to test when you're doing a lot, right? So we looked at this as, you know, how could we theoretically break this down further? Well, you're looking at email username and password to see if we're returning a 400 and bailing out. You know, is it possible we could create some, I don't know, you couldn't create a function because you need the bail. But, you know, each of these is its own little if and you know, part of me thinks, you know, would it be easier just to, you know, based on our conversations with Katie the other day, you know, maybe it's invalid user email and or username, something like that, right? Where you consolidate those. You know, what I'm looking at here is 2, 4, 8. There's 8 different routes through that. Which means you need a minimum of 8 tests. So you're checking for, let me see what you're doing here. You're checking for the email and you're checking for the username, right? But existing, what does it return? It returns,
it just returns something. So it'll either be something or undefined. So I'm just tracking if it's
well, wouldn't we be checking for undefined to return a 409?
yeah, so if it exists, well, it's checking for a truthy value.
No, I get that. But what I'm
Yeah.
saying is you're checking for existing email.
Yeah.
If it exists, we don't want to send a 409. If it doesn't exist, we want to return 409, right? Do we have that backwards?
I don't think so, because if it exists, we don't. Well, this is the registration. So if it exists, we don't want to.
You're right. Yes, this
Yeah.
is registration. If it exists, we don't want to allow it.
Yeah,
So the thought there would be then,
we could combine them, I guess.
Yeah,
the two.
if email or username exists,
Mhm.
kick it out, because that then takes us to, instead of 8 routes, 3 to 4. 2 times
Then we
2.
also have to address, are we killing like end user experience for ease of testing, right? Like they don't know which one it is if we combine them, but it is easier on us.
Well, and we need to look at our logic too, because I thought we said a username, an email could be reused across accounts. Right? Shouldn't be
That's
able
why
to
you get paid the
recreate
big
a,
bucks.
shouldn't be able to recreate a username, but you should be able to reuse an email. That way, like one teacher could create multiple accounts tied to one email.
Yeah.
Okay, so this can go away. Okay, and these are shortcuts, so it's just shortcutting out. So you need the positive route that passes both of these and gets down to here, that awaits and returns. You need a negative route here, a negative route here, so 3 pass through is what I'm seeing that as now. Does that make sense? So instead of doing this here, can we pull out a new file, auth functionality, this. So what we did over here, we need to bring some of those things in that it needs, but let's pull this function. We'll figure out what we need after the fact. We need DB. I can see that right off the bat. Down to here. And then our auth functionality, let's close some of these. Yeah. So then const register that. So we have the res, we have the request. That handles everything there. We need the DB. Which are bringing from that model. Right? So that gives us DB for user, DB for user, DB for user. Okay. And then we're returning. We return the response. Yeah. Okay. Now, why do we have to return one here? We just did the res status.
We don't have to do it at the end. Only yeah, we can remove the one at the end.
Just ask. I mean,
yeah, no, it's just I probably just copy and pasted the line and then just edited it slightly.
Okay. And then, so what we have to do now is we need to import. Oops. Register. Where. It's not doing that because I have the module exports into it, I expect. And clearly we have more in here than registered, but. And then we can then say, register. Right? And so then so then in the auth functionality, we need an auth functionality test that we then set up and start to run through. So here, we import our DB model. Now we're going to be using DB all over the place in these tests. Let's pull this over. I'm wondering if a little bit better mocking might be in store. So right now we have this request body that we'll set that up for the individual tests. Okay, so the first test, this one and this one, DB is not going to matter. Well, it is. It's going to matter here, isn't it? So we need to. And I'm wondering, because you're going to have status and send everything you do within this. Oh, we need to bring that in too. And also bring Auth functionality into the Auth functionality test suite, right? So I don't know if setting up the database to be kind of universal is going to help. I don't know. Well, I think about the time we get to the third test, we'll know. But we expect register. So we do our first negative test. To return 400. Oops, 400. Message if missing data, right? And this one, we may not actually have to do a whole lot in terms of the DB. We'll find out. So we're going to create a request. And the request has to have username. Email. And then some missing piece of data, right? Now, if you really want to force it, it's very clear what we're doing here, right? We could make them all undefined, but I think the one would be enough. We need a response that should be very similar to our responses that we had previously over here. So let's just grab that. All right, let's grab those and clear that request out of the middle. That. Request a response next. And assuming it doesn't grump about the database, we should be able to wait register. Passing it request and response. And expect response status. $400, right? Now that description's different because we're sending an object. We're going to get an object back. So in this case, we're getting rid of that. It's not a string send. Literally can just go like this. Assuming it doesn't grump about the database, this test should work. If it grumps about the database, it's going to fail, but it'll be, it just means we have to fix it at a slightly higher level potentially. Cannot destructure proper username. Oh, it's request body. Okay. We need another layer in here. That well, failed for a different reason. We got a passing test. Okay, we got 8 minutes left, and my thought is, let's do the next one. We may not finish out, but that should be enough, Dylan, for you to start at least poking at it, right? But the
Yep.
next one has that await on the database user. And we got to figure out how to handle that. So let's see if we can get that figured out. So let's copy this. We're registered to return 400 and message if username exists, right? And so we need a password to get past the password. I don't care what the username actually is, because what we want to do is we want to kind of mock this thing somehow. We need the DB user find one. And over in our previous test, we did this Jest function, right? So I'm wondering if we could do something similar here, where, just so I get, yeah, it was right before the request response. So let's put it in the same place so our tests stay consistent. So we're going to say DB user find one Jest function. And it's going to return a promise resolve. What are we resolving? True. So then your existing username would be true, and it would kick it through to that. It seems weird that it would return true. I don't know. Something there feels weird. But we'll say true to let it in there. Right? And it's no longer a 400, it's a 409. And this should now be 409. Invalid username, and this is just username, yep. So our message then becomes what? Okay. Now, it is possible that since we've set the DB username find one like this, that we need to clear that mock. A couple ways that could be done, but I don't know if it's hurting anything. You know, when you know, if we remock it on another test, it's not going to hurt. Oh, we need to bring in bcrypt too, don't we? I'm just seeing that. The same kind of mocking can occur with bcrypt. So we have the bcrypt hash, then we have the DB user create that you can then mock to see if we get that last status. Dylan, does that sound like something you can manage to move forward with?
I think so. I think.
Then you're going to get lost and stuck at times, and that's expected.
Yeah, I can, research my way out of it. So
Okay. Or reach out.
yeah, I mean, I
You
think
know,
you've shown like
I've tried to give you
kind of the
several
same
different
thing, yeah.
patterns that you can kind of lean on a little.
Yeah, they look like similar patterns there.
Mhm. Yeah, so here you'll mock out the jot sign so that it returns some token that you can look for when it comes into the send. There's all kinds of cool things you can do there. All right. So then I'm gonna come over here and I'm not sure what the Jest commands are to get the coverage. So let me look that up real quick and see if there's something automatic we're going to get, or if we have to bring something in. Those two. Well, that's not helpful. Just coverage, which is why I used just coverage the other day, and yeah, it bombed out on me. Okay. So we run just coverage. There's a coverage report. Config 100% index. Yeah, we're not looking too good. User is looking good for some reason. But you can see these two on the routes. That's where we've been working uncovered on auth functionality, which makes sense, right? Because we haven't covered the final route through it. We now have a coverage report. Oh, that's not in our we don't have a git ignore. All right, let's delete that folder. Probably we'll call it I'll run it again. There we go. You don't want the coverage to show up, so we'll make sure it doesn't show up. But you have the coverage report that this is coverage report data. Okay, this is not coverage report with an HTML. You can dig in, and there should be one. It's in the alcove. I only know this from having done it about a bazillion times. Look familiar? Okay. Config and database, they're covered incidentally. They're used someplace else. So that ran through that code one time. It's not a tested thing. Not a big deal. Model, these are probably covered somewhat incidentally too. Okay. But how hard would it be to pull this into another function that we could then test manually? And it's console log. I'm worried about that one. If we look at routes, you can see that auth. We got through the if block, we didn't get to the else. Well, the else was this, right? So a nice, easy way to see that you get your coverage where we need to be. Cool stuff.
Yep.
All right, and that code is up other than the git ignore. We got gig if ignore. There we go. So all that code's up now before you do it. Okay. So let's see. The banner is in code review. The wire auth is in code review. If you get the test done on the wire on the 27 card, I'm not going to hold it up on that. If you get it done, great. If you want to play with it, poke at it, learn some more. Absolutely willing to see that come through. If you want to push it in without it, and we can do a second card on 27, do 27 again for unit test coverage, that would be fine too. Either way is fine. Cool.
Gotcha. Do we move 35 to dev 2? I guess.
Oh yeah. So we can close that out and use that one for finally
Okay.
so what I just started to push there. Yeah. Good catch.